Good afternoon.
Welcome, Thursday Stammtisch, our weekly time to get together, have a little beer, a little theology, continuing through the
Still
story.
enjoying the winter snap here.
Yeah,
so if you
the cold
still
snap.
like cold snap, if you still
Cold
like
snap.
the cold snap, a winter brew, you can come to the sanctuary and still get it on tap. It's good stuff.
So Sam Adams seasonal is what it is. But yeah, we enjoy it actually. They've had it for quite a while. I don't know if it's a big seller here.
I don't know. He pushed it on us right away, didn't he? But it was, we like it, so we were happy to drink it out.
Not a problem. But yeah, so we're still working through the story. I don't know if y'all can see
Chapter
that.
24 this week, so we're getting a little bit deeper into Jesus' life and ministry now. I mean, we had a couple weeks ago, we saw his birth and childhood, and last week it was just the beginning of the ministry.
Yeah,
Now,
baptism, temptation,
Yeah.
and then now he's starting the ministry right on the other side of the temptation. And it went baptism, temptation, and the call of the disciples. As
Correct.
Well. So then we go from there into
kind of the meat of it. So this week we really get into the stuff that we think about. This is Jesus doing miracles and teaching parables, and I think those are the things that people most associate with Jesus in his ministry. And so it's kind of fun to sit there, and it's kind of a tour de force. You sit there and go from one to the next, to the next, to the
I read
next.
through it and I was like, oh my gosh, it's just one thing, and then he heals another person, and then he teaches a parable, and then he heals another person, and he just kind of blows through one and then another, and the next, and the next, and the next, and then on and on and on it goes. It reads real quick, heavy, and
Absolutely.
almost like it all happened in one day.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of immediatelys and that days,
Yeah.
and then he goes here and then he goes there, and so it's hard to almost get a sense of the time a little bit within it. But it does take place over a number of years of ministry for him. So talking about 3 years worth of ministry, all kind of getting squished together.
Right.
And it was one of those things we were talking, like trying to figure out, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to focus on one of them? Do we want to focus on a bunch of them? Do we want to focus on the parables or the miracles? And I think we're going to at least start with miracle discussion, because that's one of the ways Jesus starts revealing who he is. And one of them I was reading about a little bit recently was Jesus in the boat. There's a number of scenes
what?
in the boat. Oh, I'm sorry. You just want to make me say a Minnesota word right there. The boat.
In a boat.
As opposed to what I said.
A boat.
Yeah, regardless. Jesus was in one
A boat.
with the disciples. And you get a number of these scenes where Jesus is in a boat.
Yeah, that was good.
I don't know if he had a bag.
Using a bag and a boot.
Oh, man, if we have anyone that's not used to us, they're just like turning this off right now.
Bag and a boot.
That's my Minnesota accent. He's sitting there in the boat. I think I just did it again.
No, I think we're good.
Was that better? Okay.
Yeah.
And this is one of those scenes where the storms come up. So anytime he's sitting there in the water, it's like there's storms that are always involved. And I think that's one of those interesting things to look at. So he's sitting there. It's been a long day. He's done a bunch of teaching, and then this miracle happens after. He's actually in the back of the boat taking a nap, on the cushions, on the pillows, and his disciples come. And it's one of those really quick parables, or miracles, excuse me. They come up to him, they wake him up. And here's one of those places where you get the translation, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And it's actually, "Teacher, don't you care if we're perishing?" And I was listening to something on that. It's a really interesting question. Don't you care if we're perishing? When you think about how often in life we yell at those kinds of similar things to Jesus. Like how many times in life, and it's easy for us to always look at the disciples and be like, how can you say these kinds of things to Jesus? But how many times in our life do we do a very similar thing where, okay, we know God is involved. We're not people who say that God's not involved in our lives. We're not people who say that God's not there. But we're dealing with life, and we're basically asking Jesus, don't you care if we're perishing? This bad thing is happening. This bad thing is what I'm dealing with. Wake up.
It's almost a double entendre.
Oh!
Yeah, so look at their fancy words. But double intention of the word, right? Because don't you care if we perish? They're literally
They're
drowning.
about ready to die.
Yeah, but that's not the full sense of the meaning of the text, right? So what he's saying is, for us, it's a deeper contemplation of don't you care if we're perishing spiritually?
Yeah.
We know the answer to that.
Does Jesus care? And I mean, that's the hard thing, is because they know he cares. They've
Yes.
already seen
but yet
some
why
miracles.
do we still question
Why
that?
are we
Why do
questioning?
we still doubt
Why
that?
are we doubting? And now, this is the interesting thing, is you look at these kinds of incidents, and you always assume Jesus is just going to go off on them because there is no reason for them to doubt. And then this is one of the interesting things. He got up, and he rebukes what?
The wind and the wave.
The wind and the waves.
Yeah.
He rebukes the wind and the waves, and then he speaks to them. It doesn't say he rebukes them. He asks them a question. Why are you so afraid? Why do you have no faith? But it doesn't say he rebukes them. I think that's an interesting distinction. Where you're like, okay.
So he questions
we
them.
question God, and God will question us back. He'll sit there and make us think through things, and why are you doubting? Why aren't you having faith? But does Jesus get the fact that if you're in a boat and the waves are about to swamp you, that these are the questions that people ask? He's going to make you think about it. He's going to try to bring you to a greater trust and faith in him, but he's not necessarily going to throw it back at you and rebuke you. He rebukes the wind and the waves. That's the evil in the world, and God will rebuke and take care of the evil in the world. But then he's kind of gentle with them.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it doesn't say the
In a
tone.
questioning way. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes we don't always take questioning gently.
Yeah. But why are you afraid?
But yeah, he's not. Sure.
Don't you have faith? And that's the question that comes to us in those incidents in life.
So contrast that with one of the other parables where, or
Miracles?
Miracles, I should say, is when the demon is possessed, or man is possessed by the demon, and the demons recognize Jesus.
Yes.
And the demons call out to him and they say,
Don't destroy us.
Don't destroy us. I think they even reference him to being the Son of God. And,
Yes.
And so they say, don't destroy
Most
us.
High.
Yeah, so they fully recognize who Jesus is. Part of it, I think, is interesting, is they probably recognize who Jesus is more than the disciples do. They even recognize his power more than the disciples do.
But it's not about intellect, then it's about trust.
It's about...
And at least the disciples here, even if they're doubting, still have enough trust in Jesus that they're calling on him, right?
Right.
As opposed to the
Lord,
demons.
to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life,
Yeah.
right? And so... Whereas sometimes we want to put our trust everywhere else. When it comes down to it, we say, well, nothing there's nothing there. But you, oh Jesus, there's something to put trust in. Even if I don't grasp it, even if I still have my doubts, even if I don't fully understand it, I know it's there.
I mean, that brings us to one of those other famous miracles where, a man comes up and asks Jesus for a healing of his daughter, right?
Yeah,
And
Jairus,
do you believe?
yeah.
And Lord, help me. I believe. Lord, help me in my unbelief.
Mark 9:24.
Okay, I knew you knew that section well, and I think that one comes up in here if I remember correctly. But I mean, it's one of those interesting distinctions for us that we can get so hard on ourselves when we doubt, when we're struggling. Oh my goodness, my faith is being rocked, my faith is being messed with, and Jesus gets it. He understands that these kinds of situations are going to rock a person's faith. But are they going to the right place? Are we going to the right place? And the demons can have all the knowledge in the world, but they don't trust. They don't have relationship. The disciples here have relationship with Jesus. No relationship with Jesus would have looked like what? I guess continuing to bail water and yell at Jesus or something like that, and throw him overboard. I don't know. You know what I mean? But
Worked for Jonah.
But the fact that they may not really understand, but they trust enough to call on him.
Right.
And say, I know you have some kind of help for me. Even you go back to the first miracle of Jesus. You think
wedding.
about turning the water into wine. Does Mary understand exactly what Jesus is going to do? No. But she has enough relationship and understanding and trust of Jesus. She's just like, do whatever he says.
Right.
And
well,
so
it's the same way how they follow him for those 3 years and yet still hide when he goes, because they don't get it.
Nope.
And it's really not until after the resurrection
that they finally get it.
Between the resurrection and the ascension that they finally understand who he was. They finally understand what redemption is. Right. They finally understand overcoming sin, death, and the devil, and overcoming all our struggles and lack of our inabilities. I always love to lean on this verse, but when Paul says, take this thorn for me, right, a thorn in my flesh, and Jesus basically says no, and my power is made perfect in weakness, therefore I'm going to boast in my weaknesses, right, and as opposed to trying to boast in the power of self, we boast in the weakness, because then we recognize God's grace, God's strength, God's what would you say, rescue?
Yeah, absolutely.
From our whatever,
and then he does it in lots of different ways. So I mean, you're gonna see it unveil itself in a lot of different ways. I mean, last night you talked about the church, and you said we try to celebrate American independence, and not that that's a bad thing to celebrate, where we find it, and certainly as a country,
not in 4th of July, but it's personal independence that's found in America.
Yeah, and you were pointing out, I mean, that's the church is about dependence.
Right.
Dependence on God and dependence on each other.
Yeah.
And that's really what we celebrate most.
Right.
Is caring for each other and depending on each other and saying we'll help each other out.
And that's
in hard
part of the
times.
disciples are struggling to depend on Jesus. And
Yeah, and that's what he's teaching them. And even his sleeping is very intentional. I mean, let me make them work through this and figure out that they're going to come to me, as opposed to me just jumping in and rescuing right away. Well, again, you go to life. How many times do we feel like, God, can't you deal with this faster, faster, faster? And at the entire time, he's sitting there and trying to teach them something, which is to have relationship with them. You go back to the Old Testament. How long does God make them wander in the desert? 40 years. Because they had 400 years of slavery to unlearn and to figure out this is what it looks like to depend on God again, as opposed to living in a pagan foreign culture.
For water, for everything. Yes.
Absolutely. Every single day they woke up and
protection,
my food. The man
it's kind of like the psalm we talked about, right? If you build it yourself and don't have the Lord, it's in vain, right?
Exactly.
If you protect it yourself and don't have the Lord, it's in vain.
And so, I think that's just a really interesting theme to sit there and look at in the miracles.
Psalm 100.
He's teaching us.
If you didn't see Wednesday, so that's Psalm 127. So you can read that one. It's short. It's I think only 4 or 5 verses, but great psalm.
And so I think there's an important point when we're looking at the miracles, to sit there and figure out from them that they're always trying to point to something. Sometimes we just look at them as examples of God womping the earth and showing off his power. And there's an element of that to it, okay? It's him coming into the fullness, letting a little peek of his messianic and godly nature out. But he's also very intentionally doing a lot of them right around the disciples and trying to show them and teach them something, and teach them about relationship with them. And so you sit there and you want to beat your self in the head with a book because you're like, man, they don't get it yet. He feeds the 5,000. And then, a little bit later, they're sitting in a boat, and they say to him, hey, Jesus, we don't have enough bread to eat lunch. And he's like, really? Like, this is a problem, Like you just saw me feed 5,000 people, and you're worried that we got one loaf of bread and there's 12 of us.
I'm always amazed at the disciples, how quick they are to forget what they just saw and experienced. It's
until we apply it to our own lives. And
it's true. I'm not saying
we don't get a feeding of 5,000 regularly.
There's comfort.
There's distinctions.
But there's comfort in seeing the buffoonery of the disciples.
Yeah.
Because then we're like, man, they got to see more than we did, and yet, still had their struggles.
Well, how many times, again, we don't think of these things in this way, but how many times do we come to church and sit there and receive these miraculous activities, essentially, if you'd really think about it? Oh my goodness, that person just told me every single sin of mine has just been disappeared from me. I just received Christ's very body and blood within me.
Yeah.
And then I can walk back out and forget what I just had and run right back into the same sins that I've been stuck in, or run back into the same problems and tensions in my life and act like I have to do it all on my own.
Right.
Why did I just forget by Sunday afternoon what I just got? And yet I look at the disciples and I'm like, oh man, they just received the feeding of the 5,000. Why are you worried about bread?
Yeah.
Okay, I might not be worried about bread, but look at the things and the worries that I keep on myself rather than giving over. I was just talking with Jess the other day. And I know we're really not supposed to say this or whatever, but, in the burden bag, the other night, what did I put down? Man, there's these things that we've been talking about, and we're like, we need to pray more about these things. And we're like, man, we just keep going to sleep at night and forgetting to pray about these things. Like, why aren't we taking this gift that God gives us, this miraculous gift of communication with the sovereign God who's omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, and we just throw it away like, nope, we'll take care of it. Just go get some sleep tonight, Dan, and then when you wake up tomorrow, put your best effort at it. Why did I forget about the miraculous thing that God's placed in my life? And so I give God a little prayer right before I go to sleep, as opposed to sitting there and availing myself of it in a fuller and better way. And so, that's kind of one of the big things that I was sitting there and seeing when I was looking at these miracles, is how much it is about relationship with God, not just his power womping over the earth. That's part of it, but just how much it's supposed to be a sign and a teaching to people that you have this great God. Trust in me, have relationship with me, lean into me for the things in your normal life, and see where I take it.
Man, that's a good place to stop, Dan. It's good stuff. Appreciate it. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you next Thursday.
Have a blessed day.